I was at an event last week where one company was talking about how they were giving private equity, venture capital money to create a application in the healthcare industry. And that there was a lot of pressure to talk about, when is the release date? When is it going to, when are you going to put it out there? And I really respected the founder's response in that he told his investors at the time, I am not on a timeline. I will release this when it's stable. I will release this when it's safe. I will release it only after we have been able to test it properly.
Welcome to Narrative's Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Deroy and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
All right, welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome Deroy, CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan. I couldn't be more excited to be back here chatting with you and our guest.
I know, same here. So before we move on to introducing our guest today, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast Leadership Story Talks by Narrative Inc., wherever you find your podcasts. Also, leave a review if you like it enough, and check out our YouTube channel, which you'll also be able to find in our episode notes. I highly recommend people go to narrative.com, narrativ.com/podcast, where you'll be able to find our archive of more than 150 episodes at this point. Lots of resources and brilliant people have been on this show. And speaking of brilliant people, I am absolutely honored to be joined by James Francis, who's a trailblazer in both business and technology. He's the founder of Paradigm Asset Management, where he's managed over $7 billion in investments. But more recently, he's turned his attention to one of the most important questions of our time, and I'm sure it's on our listeners' minds as well. How do we build AI that reflects our humanity? And that's really what we're here to talk about. James is the creator of a framework called Artificial Integrity, a new way of thinking about how we guide artificial intelligence with ethics, empathy, and real-world accountability. He's also the founder of Sol.ai, a platform that brings culturally grounded intelligence tools to communities that are too often left out of the AI conversation. He's here to help us understand not just what AI is, but what it should be. So please welcome James Francis. Good to have you here.
It's great to be here, and thank you very much for that kind introduction.
Absolutely. I'm really delighted to be having this conversation. We had a pre-record chat a few weeks ago, and I was really fascinated by this whole, obviously the AI conversation, but really what you were bringing to it. And so I'm curious, we're going to start our podcast the way we always start it, by asking the same question we've asked all our guests. Can you tell us about an experience that has shaped who you are today, something that still informs your work or way of thinking or influences you somehow?
When I think, I can't think of one single thing, but, I think the most important part of my life was definitely my upbringing. I grew up in a family, and if I could sum it up in a couple words, I would say I grew up in an environment that fostered a can-do attitude. And that has created a tremendous amount of curiosity in me and a lot of reflection. And I would say it results in action. So, I grew up in an environment where it was not uncommon for me and my family to take on bold projects with no prior experience in
Okay.
doing that. And, I was the youngest of four, And at some point in my life, I looked back and realized and what I was doing in that moment was really from the seeds that were planted growing up in that environment.
I think that's great because, and I'm actually curious to hear one of your projects that you remember, because when we spoke earlier about AI and what is needed to help bring it forward, it's going to be curiosity, it's going to be collaboration, it's going to be critical thinking skills, and you were already doing that in your early days to work with ambiguity or uncharted territory to do something. So I think that's a very interesting backstory and example.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us. And now I know that we have in common that we're the youngest of four. I'm also one of four. So yeah, those are the best. So I want to get right into, how you got to thinking about artificial intelligence in this way that we previously talked about, which was really paying attention to the voices that aren't usually uh, maybe included in AI or AI as we know it. And I've heard you talk about the risks that AI poses for, in particular, his voices or voices that are excluded in some way. And so I'd love to hear your motivation in terms of how do you see the world of AI and what is it that you're kind of bringing to it with artificial integrity?
Yeah, so when generative AI um, captured the public's attention in late 22 and throughout the year in 2023, I felt one, had a good understanding of the technology and its impact, and that we had been managing money using data and technology for decades. And I understood the efficiency that it gave us. We managed billions of dollars using a very small team. And I knew that there was both the threat of job loss, purpose, presence, and that these technologies could create, but also the opportunity to be able to express yourself differently, to protect culture if designed properly. And so I really felt more of a moral obligation to speak up. And I thought that there was for the first time in a long time, a really level playing field. I had an
Mm,
opportunity to speak in early 2023 to a group of young Black professionals about AI. And a couple of weeks later, an opportunity to speak with a group of CEOs, Fortune, 200, call it, type of CEOs. And the knowledge was no different in those two groups at that time. And I thought
mm,
there was a tremendous opportunity if we could get the word out, get people engaged, and provide access. And
mhm,
so at the same time, so I was very excited about the opportunities, but also very keenly aware of the downside, the potential loss of narrative, loss of voice, displacement, the loss of democracy. So those are the things that drove me. And more specifically, I was looking at the area of AI ethics.
mm,
And as I was studying AI ethics and responsible AI, because those things they sprung up very quickly, and I spent time getting to know those philosophies or those doctrines, and felt that they fell short.
mm,
Meaning that AI ethics typically is a reactive approach to governing AI. And so you fix it after it's broken. And I did not think that that was going to yield the type of systems, AI systems, that would elevate humanity And so I came up with artificial integrity, which is really more about building AI systems that have empathy, that promote justice, that elevate humanity from the ground up.
Hmm. That's really interesting what you just said about fixing something after it's broken, essentially, and that which is a very as a person who's more observing this um, than really in control of it in any way. I can sort of hear that is clearly a kind of tech philosophy, right? That there's this idea that you have to fail really quick and very fast to build things very fast, put them out, and then see what's not working, and then fix those things that aren't working as you go along. And that's how, you know, many of the things that we use today, app-wise, or device-wise, have been created. And that makes a lot of sense because you have to iterate on these things. Whereas AI, well, that's a different beast entirely. And so, of course, it needs some care in terms of how we put it out there. But
Hmm.
that doesn't seem, from what I'm hearing from you, and certainly what I'm reading as well, that doesn't seem to have been the case. So I'm curious, how do you, like, what process do you have to enter into as a way to remediate some of the things that are already out there?
Well, it's a framework, right? So,
Mm,
I'm trying to do my part by creating a framework that others can subscribe to and to create a dialogue. Yeah, and I don't believe by any means that I'm alone. But we need a chorus of
Hmm.
uh of people talking about this as opposed to a soloist. So I think that for me, this is not really a technical solution. So this is more of a moral compass. And I don't believe that the issues that we're talking about are technical. I think they're leadership, they're moral obligations. And, it's a call, artificial integrity is a call to embed alignment and empathy and justice in AI systems from the ground up, as I mentioned before. So, it really starts by trying to make sure there's a platform like this to get the information out. Been very, very busy. I've had a lot of opportunities to speak. I'm looking forward to getting this book out and to really talk to everyone that I can. And I think, we're seeing good development in certain quarters. I was at an event last week where one company was talking about how they were given private equity, venture capital money to create a application in the healthcare industry, and that there was a lot of pressure to talk about, when is the release date? When is it going to? When are you going to put it out there? And I really respected the founder's response in that he told his investors at the time, "I am not on a timeline. I will release this when it's stable. I will release this when it's safe. I will release it only after we have been able to test it properly." Now, that was one aspect, and I did have a chance to follow up and have a discussion. And I'm still not convinced that in their approach that they truly took the holistic approach of ensuring that there was alignment with all of the stakeholders that would potentially come into contact with their application. Yes,
mm,
safe and in a broad sense, but was it truly safe for all the stakeholders? Meaning, did you think about the intersectionality of different people's lives? Did you think about the cultural differences in healthcare and how one organization or one community looks at healthcare practices differently than another? And so, risk mitigation approach is what you hear the industry talk a lot about, that we should uh, put in safety and risk measures. But artificial integrity goes well beyond just risk mitigation.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
the
Julian.
expression "I don't know what I don't know" comes to mind because while everyone's planning, they're in their lane, they're in their perspective. And also, I love the fact that you were saying it's important to collaborate or to have other thought people, leaders who are in this space thinking about it. And just in our own circle, just serendipitously, we've had Laura Miller who talks about integrity. Who has an artful gift of scaring the hell out of you in a meeting and then using humor to kind of bring you back out of the panic, but she raises tough questions. I had the pleasure of meeting her at a conference and watched her work the room after, we were talking about many aspects. There's Melissa Drew, there's Neil Dunn. So there are people who are bringing up
Absolutely.
what you're bringing that we will connect, of course, but I think that's important. It's not a way, it's not a traditional let's build the bus and run against alongside of it as we'll figure it out as we go. I don't think is a great rule of thumb for this initiative, what
Yeah.
we're embarking on. So
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's so great to hear um, that, that you've chosen to focus on this out of the many things you could be focusing on as an investor yourself and as an asset manager and, the founder of a company. And so it's, I guess what I'm hearing also is that really it's about educating people. I mean, you're getting this message out there that AI needs to be including the types of people that we don't necessarily see often or hear from often. And I love your example about the healthcare industry because there's something that I came across, which is, health literacy and how that is very different from different people according to where they come from, how they grew up, etc.
Right.
Education, and yeah, and so that kind of started to click in my own mind in terms of how we approach artificial intelligence because we all have, even the term artificial intelligence. I mean, everyone has different interpretations of what that is. For some, it's like a totally evil thing. For others, it's like the best thing that's going to help humanity. And most people are probably in a spectrum between those two things. And so hearing you speak, it really is about educating. But then there's also this other term that you're using, which is integrity, ethics. And I think one of the things that we discussed previous to this episode, to recording it, was the idea of transparency, building something that is more transparent about how are we getting all of this. I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about you know your framework and how you address these kinds of issues of, for people who are sort of thinking, well, I'm never going to use AI because I don't know where it's coming from and I don't understand, are they taking my data, etc. um,
Right.
I wonder how you sort of approach that.
Well, I mean, you hit on a couple things there. One I think is really important is trust. And when we particularly talk about marginalized communities, I think there is a lack of trust as it relates to identity, as it relates to the narratives, as it relates to the stories. Um, Culture appropriation has been around for a long time in different forms. And it used to be that if an artist such as Chuck Berry's music was taken by Elvis, say, for example, Elvis used to have to at least learn those moves and learn the songs and, re-record the record, and a record label had to put it out. And you may know that they were both part of that, that Chuck Berry actually did the song, and now Elvis made it into a number one hit.
Mhm.
With AI, we are seeing a couple things happen. One, that cultural appropriation can happen behind the scenes and you really never know what's going on. And so I think there's a mistrust of what's real, what's not, and that's across all communities.
Hmm.
And we know that that's being purposely uh, put forth in ways to sow division, to try to influence public perception, elections, politics, etc. But it also gets to voice and presence and purpose.
Mm,
So when AI is mimicking as opposed to truly reflecting a culture, then things can become dulled. They can become uh, where we don't recognize it anymore. There's I think people feel like, you've gotten all of this data from different communities, but now you're selling it back to us in a way that we don't understand and can't don't trust and doesn't truly reflect us. And so it's been flattened out. And I think that's one of the real risk, as opposed to looking at how you could build AI that restores lost traditions and culture, that preserves language, that really amplifies the nuances that exist. And so once again, it really goes back to the leadership that's in place. And I would say that, I play around with these tools to see where leadership shows up and where it doesn't. And so if you go in, you do experiment with these different large language models, you will see that the leadership has closed down certain gaps. You cannot get these systems to show you how to create a pipe bomb, for example.
mm,
Okay, good to hear.
However, there are gaps in the way that it may communicate with someone from a Black and brown community or someone from the LGBTQ community once it picks up that it knows one is from that community. And by the way, it does know. And it will code shift. It will undermine the person that is communicating with. And you may ask, well, why and how would it do that? Well, it's very simple. These systems reflect the loudest voice in the room, or
mm.
the loudest voice in the country, or the loudest voice in the data set. And the loudest voice is not always right. And if those things are not corrected for, then we are going to have these systems that are actually undercutting the aspirations of a large part of our community or our society. And I think that those things will continue to um, create lack of trust. So I think the transparency part comes into, you know, pulling back the onion, inviting more people into the tent, and having better policies that show what I'm doing with this data, and how it's been treated, and really our commitment to making systems that are more inclusive, so that the results are better serve everyone.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love this because it's, and even that term you used of, flattening the culture essentially. And because that's the real risk to me is that everything, yeah, it just becomes flat and monotone and yes, reflects the loudest voice in the room. And I think, it's interesting because what comes to my mind is that, the some of the most successful social movements came through advocacy and marginalized populations that were especially in health, if you take the AIDS crisis for example, that because of
Mhm.
that public health crisis, first of all there was a lot of stigma and discrimination and all of that actually targeted minorities and marginalized populations in general. But then once those people started to speak up in a very powerful way, and those organizations like ACT UP in the 80s and 90s, and really were in people's faces essentially.
Yeah.
But they were also telling their stories, and they were being given they were taking the microphone to be able to tell their stories. And once those stories started to permeate society more, then those are the voices that started to be listened to, and those louder voices that were all, not
Hmm.
exactly informing people and certainly fear mongering quite a bit. Those start to be reduced. They're not gone, but things are a little bit more level. And that's when you start to see policies shifting, et cetera. Now I'm talking about something that was in the 80s and 90s and, and a public health crisis that was pretty terrible. But that's what comes to my mind because that seems like, the advocacy piece of advocating for people having a voice and bringing them into this tent that you're describing is really what is needed at the moment that we think people are so, I mean, I'll speak for myself.
Hmm.
I feel quite open to AI and to understanding it and for it to help me. But if I then discover that it's giving me information that's biased in a certain way, that doesn't include all these culturally relevant voices that we're talking about now, then why would I use it if I'm constantly hearing the same thing, or getting the same information? So more of a comment than a
Yeah.
question, but
Okay.
but I'm curious,
An
but I am
excellent
curious
one.
about that. Well, because it's sort of, advocacy was very specific and targeted, and people could see it because you didn't have a choice. Whereas now, how do we kind of advocate for something when we have so many different channels of information? And we get people to kind of understand what it is that we're trying to talk about and the importance of it. That's the question I'm asking myself.
So the question,
Well, when you think of traditional advocacy of taking to the streets and saying we exist, we have a voice, taking the HIV/AIDS epidemic as an example. Suddenly you're on TV, or even civil rights. You're on
right,
TV. That's when things start to move. Is when media gets involved, and you start to just can't avoid the issue anymore.
right.
And I wonder with AI, because it's already so pervasive and the way we get our information, or we have so many different ways of getting information that, I just wonder about this question of how do we advocate for something like this in an effective way where, people understand that, yes, we do need more voices to be included in.
We're referring to something that informed our own work. But James, if you have an example or even a conversation that shifted or, a dialogue with a client or an audience that they were, they just changed that you're using that as your mental template of how you help people maybe think of things
Yeah.
differently or shift.
Well, I don't think that, and that's part of what I'm attempting to do, and I would admit to you, I think is difficult right now. Meaning that all those examples that you shared resulted from a groundswell, and
Right.
people are, there seems to be and I'm in a group of people that are, very involved and very interested in AI. And sometimes when I encounter other groups of people in society that say, "Oh, I've never even gone on a Chat GPT," I actually I'm a little shocked. But there's also at the same time, I have great respect for the fact that they haven't seen a need or, been seduced by the chatter that's out here every day. Sometimes I wonder how they could actually avoid it, but there's many people that actually don't. And the
Mm,
point I'm trying to make, I guess, is that I don't believe there is a sufficient groundswell of concern for that type of advocacy at a
mm,
more grassroots level.
mhm,
I think that I heard something interesting the other day that when we think about the Senate or the House, that they have been reluctant to try to put in more regulations. I think because coming from the top, there's been a effort to cut out regulations, and the thinking is that once something terrible happens, there's many legislations that are ready to be brought forth, but it will require some devastating occurrence
Mm.
to be able to get their colleagues and the public opinion to rally around something like that, then to put in the safeguards.
Yeah.
And I think there might be some truth to that, all while it being very disappointing. So I think we just don't have from a using those examples that you mentioned, we don't have enough groundswell, grassroots concern right now, or we don't have that incident to point to.
Yeah.
I think to really rally the troops in a major way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
cultural habit that's repeated itself in many
Makes
areas through
sense.
history and time that I'm like
Hmm.
mentally scrolling through right now going, okay, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
There's one more thing I wanted to touch on. Looking at the time as well, and we'll have to end soon. But I know that there are things that you've been involved, like projects that you've been involved, like Black Chat AI and Latin Chat AI, and you know exactly to your point earlier of building culturally rich platforms, that preserve these voices and authorship. Um, what are you learning from that work and everything that we've talked about? What are you learning from this work that you think leaders and
Hmm.
organizations should be paying attention to right now? I know it's a big field, but I'm
Yeah,
curious if there are some things that are kind of top of mind that you wish leaders would really pay attention to.
yeah. I think that one thing I would say is voice is not enough. I think people they want AI to not just sound like them; they want it to understand them, right? They want what I would say cultural intelligence is not just mimicking, it's really having memory. It's having
Mm,
context, it's having respect, and it's being able to design AI that invites belonging. And I think right now the belief is that it's not designed that way.
mm,
And many I hear that, well, that's not for us, right? That's not for me. And I think that it's it's this lack of believing that it's really designed, and we hear a lot about data, and data is an important part, but there's the data, there's the design, there's the development and the deployment, and so there's a lot of D's here, but it has to be thought about at every one of those components to make sure that it doesn't just mimic, but it truly understands. And I think that's what I'm learning when I hear we've done surveys with these populations to understand what they want in this. And over again, they wanted to talk to them in the way that our community talks. When we did things with Black Chat, they want the language, they want humor, they want cultural examples, and they wanted to truly be reflective of understanding how do I demystify this and and make it real to me. And so it's not just uh, a voice, but a voice that reflects community.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It kind of reminds me of, in healthcare, there's a lot of talk around patient journeys, and you're really having to understand and integrate detail, really all the nitty-gritty details of, the symptoms, the diagnosis, and what happens at each stage. And the more you dig into that, the better able you are to understand your patient and what exactly they need and how an illness develops, etc. And it's that type of work that's really needed of looking at specificity. So that's kind of what we're
Mhm.
losing, I think. Yeah,
and
Jules.
with James, I think what I also took away is it's going to change working in this sphere is going to change the dialogue of how we ask questions and solicit and prompt people to think about, are you considering X or what about this? Or prompting a deeper level of thought and discussion than giving people ready-made solutions that have been pre-vetted. You're going to be asking people to really do it, be partners in their thinking and their collaboration and their ownership in the process, which is a whole different dialogue than we're used to having.
Absolutely. There's people I've heard that, a lot of the builders will say, well, we want AI to reflect society. And my response is, well, reflect what? Mirrors reflect, but AI magnifies.
Mm,
And AI doesn't have values, but it
mm,
scales values. And so it's going to scale what's there. And what I would say, what's there right now doesn't work.
mhm,
It will not take us to where we want to go as a society. It will not elevate. One of the amazing things about AI, whether it's applied to healthcare, it can unlock um, solutions to many of our, biggest healthcare issues, education. It can create personalized learning tracks and learning assistance. Um, Food. I mean, there's so in any area where we've had issues over time, AI truly does present an unlock for those situations. But we have to step back and be committed to putting the work into those areas as opposed to focus purely on, can we make AI smarter?
mm,
AGI, this rush to make it so smart, to make it efficient, to make it more productive, as opposed to how can we make it where it serves better? How can we use it to elevate? How can we use it to create more just, more fair, and more equal society? And so it's, as I said before, it's not a technical issue; it's a leadership issue.
yeah.
And so, we don't need better machines or smarter machines. We need better leadership. We need better humans at the helm.
Yeah. Well, and you're one of them. So thank you so much for being with
Yeah.
us today and being willing to share this with us as well. We're running out of time, but I'd love to maybe if there's anything you want to leave our audience with, things for them to think about. You've given us plenty, that's for sure. And I really appreciate that. But if there's, yeah, anything you want to leave us with, links, resources, whatever it is that you think might be helpful to all of us.
Well, I do have the book coming out. I've got, it's probably going to get pushed back, but at some point, artificial integrity, I'm hoping still in November, artificial integrity will be out, and Sol.ai we're rebranding Black Chat AI as Sol.ai, SOLE.ai. So those are two places that you can find the work that we're working on. And I guess I would say that, I'm most interested in protecting voice with a big V, meaning, not just voice in every dimension that you can think about it, and reclaiming purpose and presence through AI. So, we cannot stand to lose the voice. We cannot lose our democracy in this AI era. And I think that, that is the most important thing to protect, because at the end of the day, that's what makes us human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and talk about this super important issue. And yeah, certainly have opened my eyes through this conversation and previous ones. And yeah, just want to thank you for being here. And I want to thank our listeners for being here as well. And really want to encourage everyone to look up James Francis, Artificial Integrity, SOLE.ai to find out more and get involved and, yeah, just keep learning. I also want to invite our audience to go to our website, narrative.com, NARATIV.com, where you'll be able to find this podcast and many of our
Mhm.
previous podcasts as well. Our entire archive, in fact, of 150 episodes at this point,
Hard
more.
to believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, it's been amazing. So yes, thank you, thank you. You're the ones who are keeping it going. And of course, if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, because that way you won't miss an episode. And you can also check out our YouTube channel if you want to see us in visual form as well. All of this drives the word of mouth, and we want more and more people to be able to have access to James Francis and our many other guests and drive that word of mouth.
Mhm.
So there you go. That's all the information I've got for today. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jules, for being my wonderful
Yes,
co-host.
yes. And we're all learning about more than ever the power of dialogue and story to champion great ideas and good people pulling people together to do wonderful work. So thanks.
Absolutely. And thanks again,
Thank
James,
you.
for being with us. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you both.
All right. We'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.